Okay, I just finished the rudder. I've been waiting on parts. I've got my kit number 7 here I'm working on. Just missing, wings are all ready to cover, except I'm missing the cable on one and the wiring harness on the other and the baggage door frame on the fuselage. So this is all sitting waiting to get something so I can cover. So I've just been covering tail feathers. I talked a little bit, I did a little video about, I think it was a stabilizer of the elevator earlier. And this is a rudder. It's just a general overview. I'm not going into the whole details on it, but it is a little more difficult to do. Mostly, obviously this is the front of the airplane, this way. So this is the left side of the aircraft and the right side of the aircraft. As an airplane propeller moves, the prop wash comes back on the left side of the plane and hits the left side of the plane. And I'm assuming that's why they do some things different, like why they put the joint, the overlap on the right side. And it's kind of strange in that this tape, if they say goes on, only if you look at it, it only wraps and goes to this side, but on the other side, they call for it to stop. I don't do that, but that's what they call for. I'll show you the book is here. This is the cover manual. And in the forum post here, you'll see that I've got a lot of comments about this also. But this is section AA. So this is looking here and looking, in this direction. So it's like this here. You'll see that they show a 2-inch. This is the code for the 2-inch tape that's going, over there and stopping. Most all the ones we do actually overlaps and goes both ways, but they show here going from the left side. See, it's going from this direction, so it'd be from the left side over and stopping there and not wrapping around that side. I don't do that. I go ahead and wrap this side and go tuck it underneath. I just make sure the top one is over on this side, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that. But here's some other stuff in here. One thing I did talk about in the forum here is you see in this diagram BB, which is coming down this direction from the top. This is the little small outside tube of the rudder. You see that little thickened part right there? I got poly brush all over me. That little thickened part right there, that's showing where the seam is. That is the seam right there. So you can see that the seam is going to go on there and go on the left side. So I don't know why, but the same thing there. Instead of going in the center, I think if you look at the Cup Crafters video, he talks about putting it in the center and holding it. They don't say that. They say put it to one side, okay? So everything is favoring to wrap everything to the right side, meaning there's not as much hanging out on the left side, maybe where the prop wash is. I mean, I don't know. That's just my guess as to why you would do that there. So this is the left side. So what we did then was basically you started it by putting this side glued and wrapping it around first. So you lay it down so that you've got the left side up, and that way it's going to tuck up underneath. And no, I'm backwards. It's going to be the other way around. Start on the right side, and that fabric is going to wrap up and come over and then be below this. The joint is out of sight. Here it's down below because you come across and this fabric is out of the way. And then you're going to take the left side, and you're going to take it and wrap it around. And so the joint, the edge will be on top of the other side. So that's the way that goes. Then putting the tapes out, I always put these tapes, you got 2 inches here. I always just run a straight line on out to here. And then I run the tape as one single piece across here to here, and then I lay it over, and then I mark the bottom of this, and then I just use the pinking shears and I cut it so that it goes here, it goes to there, and then the same thing for the other side. Again, for some reason they want this one. They were showing only to put this tape here and stopping it here, but on the other side, not to even have a tape there, which was kind of unusual. If you see here, they show this tape here just going down this edge and stopping. And I don't know why. I mean, I just ran it all the way down to make it look nice all in one piece and then tucked it back under there. And then on the other side, I put that tape and I wrapped it back and tucked it on top. So I don't know why they wanted to stop there, but to me, it wouldn't look as nice. I just didn't have that pinked edge all the way out there and the same on both sides when you do it. There's more to do with this because you've got a lot more attachments and things to get in your way. This is this takes a round patch. And what you're going to do is you're going to lay the round patch. It's a 5-inch round patch that you use on all your inspection covers. And just kind of lay it down there and mold it to where it'll lay across here. And then mark the center right here on both sides once you get it kind of where it lays nice and flat before you've, installed it. And then just draw a line here and use straight scissors and cut it here and cut it here. And then when you tape it down, just go like that. Then in here, you see we're going to cut this out anyway. So I just cut slits up here and then cut it off in short pieces and then tuck it back in like this. The fabric was here. I did the same thing. I went ahead and got the fabric on, got it all shrunk, got the rivets installed, got all the poly brush for the first 2 coats that we put down first before we put the tapes on. And then I just cut it and then I tucked it back. And then I actually then took some poly tack. And with the poly tack, we used, what's fun, when you just need to do a little something like that, I use these little brushes here. You can get at Hobby Lobby, they're nothing, they're little throwaway. I think they call them acid brushes. So those are good little throwaways, but then just pull it out and get you some poly tack, put it behind it, and then just push it back up in there. I just use my finger, as you can tell, and just push it back up in there and just kind of hold it as it starts to get stiff. Just keep pushing it back in there. And then later you can take the tip of your hobby iron like that there. You can just take that very tip and then just kind of run it around and seal it down in there later to where it's in the way. Then I go ahead and pull my wire out now, cover it with some tape, and have it so it's ready to go when we get ready to start painting it. So anyway, that's where this patch here is a round patch. You won't use the whole patch. You won't really cut it in half. You'll lay it across here, across here like this, and just lay it to where it lays nice and flat, pretty much flat. You can get it where it's flat with no bubbles. Just lay it across there where it fits nice. Just kind of hold it and then just kind of mark the center, cut it with a straight scissor so you don't see the joint across there. And then you tape it in, and it'll be across here. Don't worry about it puffing in here. Your light fixture is going to be all the way across all of this anyway, so who cares? You're not going to see any of this. Just lay it across here. Poly brush it down to here. Let it set till it gets kind of hard. I always use my iron. Every time you got where it lays over like this, poly brush this part. Then while it's still wet, just go right back in and just take your iron, just kind of iron those edges down where they're nice and flat, and then put you just a little poly brush on them to hold them down and let it dry. And then for the second coat, then after it kind of dries, then you come back and make your cuts, make your little cuts here and slits, and then just kind of push it, back up in here out of the way. And that way you can go ahead and, like I say, and expose your wires. They say leave 4 inches sticking out. That's a little ridiculous. Just enough to where you can solder them onto the wire. The rudder light itself has a long harness on it, so you're just going to solder sleeves or whatever you're going to do, and then you're going to have to push that all back up in there anyway. So there's no sense having 4 inches here. I just let the other part come out over there. Of course, don't forget to pre-wire it before you do it, and you have to drill and tap 2 holes right here that will be used for the screws that will hold the rudder. Excuse me. Polytac's still a little, I just put the last coat on, so it's still gassing off a little bit. So, yeah, this is actually a little fixture that's welded on top of the tube that's coming across here, and it's pre-drilled with 2 little holes, but it's not drilled all the way into the main tubes. Those tubes are hard. So anyway, you're going to drill it with a drill bit. Look in the lighting manual, and it'll tell you how to drill that out. I forget now. So it's a number 4 tap, and I forget the drill. I think it's a 28 or no, don't listen to me. I think it's 43. Anyway, it tells you in the lighting manual, and in the forum post I'll refer to it too. But you'll drill them all the way through, then you'll tap them, and I go ahead and take the screw and run it to it and just make sure it's all good now before I go any further. So anyhow, that gets your wire out here. Then, of course, what you're going to do is I always, on these tapes, and I've talked about this before, so I just take my 2-inch tapes, I lay them out, and I just cut a straight cut here and a straight cut here, and then I lay it over when I put the tapes down dry, but into a wet bed. So I put a good heavy coated poly brush here, lay the tape down, and then where that edge is here, I just kind of was pre-cut nice and straight. I just kind of put it where it's going to be in about the center. And I get that side started. And then I just go on and taking one hand, holding the tape there, picking this up so it's not into the poly brush, and I get it where it's nice and straight. Then I just set it down into the poly brush. One thing you don't want to do is try to pull it and make it tight or whatever. In fact, the looser you can let it is the better, because then you're going to take, if you look at the video I have out showing you kind of how to poly brush tapes in, where you get the least amount of air bubbles around them, is that you're going to take the brush very wet. You're going to put a lot of poly brush around the rivet heads, and especially on the ends where it'll pop up. So I puddle it. I take the brush and kind of dab it where it's actually puddled, and then just make it nice and wet. Run the brush sideways here and here. I've got my brush here. I'll just show you. So I kind of take a wet brush, I kind of puddle it like this. I dab it, and I actually turn it sideways to squish a little poly brush out. So I put a lot of poly brush around the heads, and then I come back without rubbing this poly brush off. I just take this edge, then I run the edge, and then the other edge, and then fill it in, but leave that wet, a lot of wet. And then you lay that tape, on it like I talked about, and lay it gently, and don't pull it. And then what you'll notice is if you pull it, then you're pulling it over. This is the high spot of these rivet heads, so you don't want to pull it where it's, you don't want to bridge it so much. You want to let it lay down into it. So you basically, I start in the middle with a wet brush and just start kind of pushing it down like this and spreading it out and working it back this way, but not pulling the tape. If it's real wet, the tape gets to move a little bit, which is kind of good, because if it's real wet, it lets the air bubbles push out to the edges or to the ends. But just be aware of that as you're going, not to be trying to push the tape one way or the other. And then of course I do the same thing on this side here. I do the same thing. Then I lay it, I just poly brush it to here, and you have your remaining sticking out, and then I mark it with a pencil right in the center of that edge, and then I do a straight cut. And then after the straight cut, I take my iron and I just iron it down so that it makes a nice bend there. And I do the same thing on this side. And then I just take a real dry brush with just a little, so it doesn't goop down and get all on the back side. I just kind of dab it on the end and brush it in on both sides. Continually while I'm brushing, making sure I'm not having any that's running over the edge and puddling up back here. So last thing I always do is make sure I've got that bottom edge cleaned off before I go to the next one. So that's the best way to do that. Don't worry about it. You just put the straight cuts. You don't have to match them up. You're never going to see them. A straight cut edge, it's just a nice edge. The whole edge of this thing is like a piece of rebar almost anyway. It's kind of rough, and you got that seam, the seam from the fabric envelope that's on there too. So that's always going to be a little bit of a rough edge here, but you won't see any straight cuts you won't see. You can get rid of even the cuts with the pinking shears, and you can see what I kind of do is I always work everything over with my iron a lot. Between every single coat, I run my iron over the edge like that to make sure. And I use my fingers just like I'm going to feel them. And make sure if I feel a rough area, I just kind of run the iron, back over it. Probably I like it like something like 300 degrees, probably something like that. It's not real picky on doing this. If you get it too hot, it melts it too much. If you get it not hot enough, it won't do much. And keep your iron real clean so it doesn't stick to it. But anyway, I just run the edges of it and make sure everything's nice and smooth with my hands. And I just do it between every single coat. You could probably wait until the last coat before you poly sprayed. But I don't. I like to just do it as I go. Again, as I've talked about before, these teeth on the edges here, MEK is what's in the poly brush and poly spray and everything. That's the basically like the reducer that you're putting in it, and that it comes from the factory with. And that, as I've described before, that each coat of the polyfiber process actually melts into the next coat. So because you have the MEK, and when you put it on wet, it actually kind of dissolves the next layers, and then this layer kind of goes down into it and then just kind of blends in with the current layer. If you peel it off, it's all one layer. You won't see multiple layers. It actually molds into each other all the way through the poly spray. So, and now while I'm talking about that, I'll just go ahead and talk about there is a MEK, which we use to clean stuff with it. There's a new MEK substitute. And this is good because it doesn't have the negative bad properties of MEK when you're smelling it and getting it on you and so forth. So it has not a bad smell, and like I say, you don't have to worry about that. And I use that. What I do is You can use that to clean the edges. I do that here, I've already done. I take a rag and I just go along the edges with a little MEK and get the excess off. Here, as I've talked about in other videos, I take one of these little squirt bottles and I put MEK in it. And when I take a rag, like this one I just got through using, I'll just take my finger on the edge of the rag. Like I said, this is all safe to use because it's a substitute. And just squirt some of it on and get it wet. Then if you want to clean something, then just take it, and I just take my finger's edge and just run it along the edge. I don't worry about it getting up on that edge. If it does, that's fine. We got 2 more coats that we're going to put on here before we poly spray it. So I get the edges. I like to get, if I've got any, like especially in these corners, you'll have a lot of excess poly brush. And if you get a whole lot more, the poly brush is a filler. So it goes in and fills the holes in the fabric completely so no air gets through it. And it'll hold all the future stuff, the poly spray, and then your top coat paint color. So that's the purpose. Remember, you're trying to fill this fabric, so it's good to get plenty of it on it and get that fabric filled. But it does actually show up a little bit different. If you get a big globs of it, you'll see the globs through the paint. And if you get a whole lot on it, see how it's kind of shiny when you look at it like that. Usually after we brush and spray 2 more coats of poly brush on here, it won't be real shiny. It'll be somewhat shiny when it's filled. But when it's not filled, you can see the edges here, like where it's not much, that's dull. But when you get over here, you can see the shiny, and it's really filled good there because this had 2 coats before the tapes went on, and then it had a coat with the tapes, and it had a coat over the top of the tapes. That can actually show through in some paints. It'll actually make the paint shinier and smoother in one spot than it will be over here. So I try to go back before, especially before I poly spray, and I clean these edges up, pretty much just like I just showed, just by putting some on a finger, my finger through there like that, and then I just go up and run that finger right up along the edge of those tapes, and that way you've got everything pretty much in a straight line. You can do pretty much anything with poly brush. You can use the iron, on it, just like I say, not too hot that you're just melting globs of glue, of poly brush, I mean. And you can clean it with the MEK, and you can do that all the way up through getting ready for the poly spray. But the poly spray, you can't do that. The poly spray with a silver, you touch that iron on it and boom, it's just done. You have to use a piece of Teflon, like a disc. I think they make cooking sheets. I've got some Teflon discs that I use for some hunting tree stands on a tree stand company I used to own called Swivel M, and we use those Teflon pieces of Teflon. It was very flexible, but we used them in a disc because it had a swivel seat that you sat in, so it's very quiet and very smooth. So that's where I use this little disc, and I'll lay them down if I have to on the poly spray. But what I was getting to is because you've got the MEK and further applications all the way through the poly spray, even though it's perfectly, all the edges are down, but when you spray something else on there, sometimes that the MEK in the product will go down in and will actually loosen maybe a little tooth or 2 or something. And so like after you get even poly spray down, you may run your hands down and you'll feel some teeth maybe sticking up or popping up a little bit. Then you take that little piece of Teflon, then you can take your iron through the Teflon and you can heat it a little bit and it'll just glue the edge right back down. You can actually take that Teflon and kind of run it down the edges if you want. The way this iron is not hot, so, but the way I do the edges is I just kind of take them and I just run about this side of the iron over here, see, along this edge, and I make sure it's flat, and I just kind of run it at about that speed right there. And I got my other finger, I just kind of run it along, see if it's good. If it is, I just kind of go back to the next one. So it doesn't take long, it's pretty easy, I don't stop anywhere and let it sit there and then it'll kind of melt into the poly brush. You could even leave a little iron mark, which is not a big deal, just get it out. But it's just easier if you don't melt it because then it clumps up. So just kind of always keep the iron moving, and just enough to do what you want it to do. You can also take these edges. I just like to do it for looks, but see where the edge where this tape here comes over the brush and leaves that line. I just like to kind of, if there's any places you want to kind of smooth them out or get rid of those edges, you can actually, once you've got your couple of coats of poly brush on there, every time if you just kind of do that edge and rub it in, put some pressure, hold down on it, and just kind of work that edge, just push that edge down with the heat. And it's amazing, it'll melt the poly brush and it'll actually push the teeth down into the existing poly brush. You can almost make them disappear. So if there's areas that you don't really want to show the joints, we'll see like here, I just do not see that joint. I mean, it's all done right. I put these tapes on first, and then they're joined together, the 2-inch tapes on the other side. And obviously, I was talking about before this, if you look at the rudders and the stabilizers and elevators and stuff, this piece that goes across is like a piece of Z. So the rivets on this side are not the same as the rivets on the other side. They're dislocated, so you can't wrap it around. You know, if you look back underneath here, you see here, it's over here. Up here, it's over there. So you can't wrap it around. So you got to bring it to the edge, cut it, bring that one over to the edge and cut it. And you can't see, you know, the joint in there. You're seeing here is just the same of the thing. So you'll never see that. So just cut it right there and joint it. And then the tape's going to go, these are what you want to make pretty. It doesn't matter much about the fabric, but the tapes are what you're going to be the final thing that you see. So you want those pretty and straight and everything aligned just the way you want to look at it, just for aesthetics, okay? So that's what I do with the iron. I just go over it real good every single coat before I do another coat and make sure everything is kind of pretty like I want it. With the MEK, like I say, I use this bottle that I can squirt, so you don't have to like spray anything, and it just squirts as you squeeze it. There's a tube down in there. Those are very cheap on Amazon. Poly brush and poly spray. I've seen some people say there was a time that you had to use this within. That's not true. I've talked to poly brush people, polyfiber. Poly brush and poly spray can last indefinitely mixed. So there's no timeline on it. This is actually from my last kit. I had it, I take pretty much like a gallon at a time, and I'll pour it out. I'll pour the reducer in and mix a whole gallon at a time. And then I just write mixed on here so I know it is, and then I store it, and it'll store forever. So this is from my last airplane. I've just used it to do the tail feathers with. It's kind of neat. I just take the whole can and just shake it up really good. It's not hard to mix poly brush. Poly spray is a different story. It clumps up and all that silver congregates to the bottom. It's like mud, and you got to really break it up and really work it in good, those silver particles. But the poly brush is very, very simple. So that and this is one I find is very helpful, because the thing is, you're doing like tail feathers. I mean, it takes you 10 minutes to go slop some, you know, a couple of, I say slop, to put down a couple of, put your tapes and stuff down, or put your poly brush down before you do the tapes. So I just take this, give it a good shake, take it, pour a little bit in here. And if it's cool weather, I don't worry about covering. If it's hot, you know, then I keep this kind of covered. If I'm going to be more than just a couple of minutes, I just take a rag and throw over this to keep the air out, because the MEK, as you know, goes out of here quick, and this will thicken up real fast the more it's exposed to the air. MEK is a super fast evaporator. So anyway, when it's cool, I'm about 30-something degrees outside. I'm in my garage. It's probably about 60. So there's no concern with it. This one's kind of neat. It's got a little magnet on them. You know, you get them at Lowe's. The thing about putting tapes and stuff down, as I do say, is to get a good brush. This is actually a brush that was made for, it's a 2-inch brush, and it was made for oil stains and stuff. And it works very well. It holds it good. It doesn't let it drip. And the biggest thing is the hairs don't come out. A good quality brush, this one was $10. But a good quality brush, the hair don't fall off. If you use the little chip brushes like I use for all the paint and stuff, these little chip brushes like that, they come in 1 and 2 inches. Those are great for doing glue work, because you just, you know, throw them in the trash when you're done. And but this one, you'll clean it and keep using it, obviously, for $10. But you want a good quality brush to put poly brush down with, okay? Then I just take one of the mixing containers, and this is MEK. I just put enough in there, see, so that I can put my brush in there and clean it deep enough for the brush. So I put it in here, work on it with my brush, come back over here when I'm done. I'm gonna let this dry 24 hours. They say at least 2 hours, but 24 hours is best between coats. So you can leave it and then go do something else. But what I do then is I just take the lid off this, and you have to keep the lid on, like I say, or that'll be gone tomorrow. And then pour it in here, and then just clean the brush, smush it off in there, and rinse it off kind of good. Then I take it and dab the brush into here to get all this stuff out of it. And then I just take this, swoosh it around, clean this a little bit, and then I just pour it back in here and put the lid on it. Now I've done, with one change of MEK, I've done all the tail feathers. There's both stabilizers and elevators, and then here's the rudder. So I just dumped it. Okay, so I used that. It'll turn very red. And so I dumped it out because I'm done. I won't be doing any covering until I get the rest of my parts. So I used that much, tossed it. I just put clean in there because I wanted to clean my brush real good because I know I'm going to put it away maybe, you know, for a few weeks. So that's what I do. Clean it up and then just dry your brush off and then everything's cool. You can pour any excess if it's not too thick back into here. Seal your lid up and you're good to go next time you use it. I do like to use a respirator when I'm using this. It will tend to give you a headache, and of course, real MEK is in this stuff, and it's what I'm told is it's a cumulative effect in your body. So try to stay away from it as much as you can. And I really can't think much about it. I'll show you what I kind of do so I keep moving. These are diving weights. It's just like lead shot. It's 5 pounds, I think, but they come in handy. And I take a couple of 2x4s. I've just taken some rags and taped them, so it just gives you a nice little cushion. But what it does is, you see I put them down there so that I can flip it over like that while it's still wet, so I can carefully hold the horn and one of the hinges or something here. And then I can do the tapes and stuff on this side, and then I can go ahead and turn it over and set it on those 2x4s. And then, because it gets kind of shaky, so that's when you just take this and put it on top of the end of one of those, and it'll hold it nice and steady while you work on it. I do this once I start doing the tapes and stuff, so that way I've got room to work. And then especially nice when you're doing the poly brushing, because then you can do this and then get up underneath the edge with your brush, make sure you don't have any run off there. And then by doing this, it lets you flip them over pretty quick. And then if you did have any where it kind of spilled over, you know, ran down through here and you didn't catch it, then you can see it on the other side in time and get it off with your brush. They show you using a little teardrop patch. It goes around these pieces. And this is one they don't really talk about a lot. Get it up here. Sorry about that. This is a patch. They got a patch number they call out for. It's never been in the kit. I just take one of the 5-inch round patches because we usually have some extras, and cut it down a little smaller. This is actually if you look at a 5-inch round patch, this is the center circle they've drawn with the pencil, and it's got an outer circle that's like that. So this would have been the edge of the plastic grommet here, and then the patch actually would have been this big. You don't need it. I just cut it out right there. You just want to patch around where this hose is coming out, or the wires, you know, are coming out. So the wires went down in that slot that came from here, that went down in that slot. If you look in the cover manual and the forum post, I show you how that goes. And you just put some electrical tape here, come down here, put some electrical tape here. This wire is exposed where this little Z frame goes over, so you got a little opening there, and then it comes out. This is the, excuse me, this is the left side of the rudder. And when you install it in the airplane, it's going to go around like this. It's going to wrap around here, and then it's going to go into the fuselage on this side. So it'll eventually wrap this way, then go into the fuselage. And this is 9 inches from here to there is about 9 inches. And it doesn't matter as long as it's somewhere close, somewhere around there. You're just going to pick a spot. But when it goes into the fuselage, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to come up from the fuselage, so you're matching it. So you're going into the fuselage on this side here. There's some tubes coming up. You'll just burn a hole there. It'll come around your fuselage. The back of your fuselage will be here. It'll wrap in between. And then it'll go into that hole, and then you'll connect the wires there. So the wire pieces are somewhere here, and oh, here they are. So you see, it'll come with a connector. This end of the wire has the female or the male connectors already on it, pin connectors, and they should have given you the housing, and there's a ground wire bare there that you'll connect with the wiring harness in the fuselage. That little piece should be there. And don't attach this at all until after you are finishing the airplane. This will, because once again, because you'll have to keep, this is just taped on here right now. So you got the 4 wires and a ground wire here with the pins on them. And I just kind of tape those together. And then you're going to have to push it up through the fabric. You're going to have to cut a hole in the fabric, push it through the fabric. And then when you get the patch, you got to cut a hole in the patch. You got to push it through the patch. So make sure you don't put And then after you put it in the fuselage, you got to push it through that hole in the fuselage. Then once it's inside the fuselage, that's when we'll put the connectors on there to connect with the wiring harness that's in the fuselage already. So just leave that, but I just, instead of having to hunt it up later, I just tape it to the end of these wires. And then before I paint, I'm gonna clean this off with some MEK. Then I'll take this and cover this with some paper and tape to keep it protected, you know, from the paint as you go. These little teardrops that go on here, you just take one of those teardrop patches. You're gonna cut it to the shape here, or here, and here, and then just take it to the middle and then I cut it across in the middle there. You're never gonna see this joint because it's gonna butt right up to the fuselage. And then if you're like me, you're gonna put the gap seals in there too. That's gonna go in there. You're never gonna see any of that, so it doesn't matter. That's where I do. It's got the pink cut there. It would actually wrap it around a little further and you'd see it on that side. I don't like that, so I just cut it across here and let this one stop. The other side stops there, and away you go. And you can see here that this is the left side, and you can see here this is where the overlap, the joint was. So this is the side that everything comes over to for whatever reason they do it on the rudder. And I really can't think of anything else. Hopefully that covers it. You can just see the order. I put the 2-inch tapes on. Then I put this over the top to cover all the joints here and to go across these 2-inch joints. And then I round this edge here that's on this side. And you just kind of set, I draw a line. I set the 2-inch tape where it's in the center. And then I come over here and I draw a line. Then I get my, whatchamacallit, and not calipers, compass. I get the compass. Once I see where that's at, then I draw a line down through there. And then that lets me know where I'm gonna put this side of the tape. And then and I just fold it over on this end, clamp it right here, pull it across so I can mark my joints here where these hinges are gonna be. So I mark my hinges on there, and I'm gonna have a cut. I'm gonna take this tape that's underneath, I'm just gonna cut it from the edge down and around, so it'll go around that hole, not buckle. And then the patch is gonna go on top. And so obviously then you'd put this on, then you'd put this patch, and you'd put these patches. And then the last one I put on is, you can put these tapes on, and then you put those half rounds that we put on there and come right here. And you can see in the video how to do that. You just got to pull, these tight where it starts to lay down. And again, by marking with the compass your locations, I don't guess you can see them anymore because the poly brush is taking it up. But by taking the compass and pre-marking where this is a 2-inch tape. This is only 3-inch tape on the rudder. Everything else is 2-inch, 2-inch. These are the 2 inches that are here too. So by doing that, you can lay it over and just pull it tight. Use clamps, pull it tight. This piece comes to here. This piece starts here and goes to there. So you've got 2 separate pieces on the rudder. On the elevators, you won't, because you don't have this light in the way. But lay it over, pull it tight, and then just go back when you got it pulled tight and clamped, and it's just sitting there, and you don't have any poly brush or anything done yet. Then you can just go over and you can just kind of start to maneuver it, just kind of twist it so that it's following your line. You can twist it so it goes more on that side or more on this side. And just get it where it's nice and even and following your line. And then once you got that, then take your iron and just start to iron down, because it'll still be buckled in some areas. Just start to iron those buckles down and shrink that tape up, where it lays flat. And then I just leave the clamps in. I come back and put some poly brush in between the clamps. And pretty much by the time you've gotten from one end to the other end, kind of doing the edge and everywhere, then you can come back and I take that clamp off and move it just a few inches to where I've just poly brushed. Then I'll take my iron, fix that up real pretty where that clamp was, put a poly brush on it, and go to the next one and so forth. And by the time you've done that, you can take all the clamps off. And then you can turn it over to the other side and do the same thing. Iron it down nice and flat all the way around. And you won't have any clamps in your way then just poly brush it in. Then, these extreme bends here, you'll probably have to come back, and you can see where I've gone back and ironed it as smooth as can be. But at one point, that was kind of a little buckle. I just ironed it down. These irons, you can pretty much work anything and make them look just beautiful. This is You can see this is just pretty much a perfect look to it. But you may not think it's going to look that way till you start working it with that iron. Just heat it up and you can melt the poly brush, and you can melt the fabric, shrink the fabric enough to make it all fit good. So anyhow, I guess that's it. 35 minutes. Hope it helps.